Welcome to It's Been How Long? The podcast about Cherry Hill High School East students from the late 1970s and early 80s. This is Kara Siegel. I'd like to welcome in Nanci Levy Epstein to the It's Been How Long podcast studio today. Hey, Nanci.
Hi there.
How's it going?
It's going.
Good. I can't thank you enough for agreeing to be on the podcast today.
My pleasure. I've been enjoying listening to them. It brings back memories.
Oh, yes. Yes. So I'm going to change the order of questions and say, show us your range of motion.
Okay, here we
Look at
go.
that.
That's
All
about as
right.
good as it gets right now, which is
That's
pretty
awesome.
good considering.
That's impressive. Are your OT buddies like keeping track and keeping to task?
Yes, they are. And the PT therapist that I go to is very happy with my range. Obviously, I am not as happy with my range because therapists make the worst patients because we just want to be healed like that. I have a
Yes.
lot of tolerance for my patients when they, have issues, but I don't have it for myself. But that's just typical.
All right. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, and I know Paul Richmond is cheering you on as he goes through his
And
rehab as
I've been
well.
cheering Paul on. It was very nice. He had posted, and then I
Yeah.
actually, because we're friends on Facebook, as I am
Yeah.
with a million people from high school, but I
Yeah.
actually reached out to him. And so then we became really close, and we were like talking every other day as he
Oh,
was going
nice.
through it. And we've been talking now, we're back probably maybe once a week. But
Yeah.
it's great to see someone who's been going through what I'm going
Yeah.
through. And I see how well he's doing. And so it's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, other than your rehab, what keeps you busy these days? What are you up to?
Work, family, activities, all of that.
Okay. Well, tell us about your work.
Okay. So when I graduated high school, I went to college in Boston, Boston University, Go Terriers. And
So you and
I
Eddie
got a,
Denkin.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
and I got a degree. I had majored in psychology and minored in art. And then I graduated, and I knew that at some future point I was going to have to go on for my master's, but I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I came back. I worked in Boston for a little while at a psychiatric hospital, but then I moved back home, and I got a job working at a nursing home as a recreational therapist.
Oh, yeah.
And I started to take some classes. I had just thought that I would go to school for my master's in exercise physiology.
Yeah.
Took two classes, and then unfortunately, my father was killed in a car accident, as
Oh.
and so I decided to take off a semester or so from grad school. I figured I had plenty of time. I was only 24 years old, and I was working, and so I worked in the nursing home. And one of the occupational therapists came to me, and she said, I have a patient who had a stroke and who used to paint and would like to paint again, but doesn't have a lot of mobility. And I was like, well, what do you want me to do? And she said, well, I'll take care of all of the motor part if you can take care of the art part. She said she couldn't draw a straight line with a ruler. I said, okay. So she rigged up this, it's called a BFO. It goes on the back of the wheelchair. And as long as you have some shoulder movement, your
Yeah.
arm will move. And then we put a cuff in her hand and she could paint. Great. She had another patient who had a different disability, and she came to me and said, let's work together. We worked together on 2 or 3 patients. And then she took me out to lunch and said, you need to go back to school and you need to get your master's in occupational therapy. She said, this would be the perfect field for you. And I went, okay. So as a psych major, I didn't have anatomy and physiology and,
Mm.
advanced chemistry. So I went to Temple, took a couple classes, and then I went to Jefferson in Philadelphia and got my OT degree.
Oh,
I
what a great
graduated.
program.
It was a great, fabulous program,
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
And I liked living in Philly. Um, I graduated from OT school in 1990. For the first 5 years that I was out of school, I did traumatic brain injury,
Yeah.
which was really cool. And along that
And
time,
did
I
you
met
stay
my
at Jeff and
husband.
do it?
I worked at McGee for a little while, and
Okay.
then I actually worked at a place in West Deptford. There was a manor care nursing home, but they had a traumatic brain injury unit. So I worked on
Hmm.
that as well as doing general rehab. Um, and then I met my husband, and who went to west, and I tell him that I went slumming and crossed Route 70 to marry him. We just had a couple months ago, we had our 31st wedding anniversary.
Mazel
So
tov.
that was nice. Yeah. And so I worked for 5 years doing traumatic brain injury until my oldest was born. And then I went to work at the Jewish Geriatric Home and
Mhm.
did seniors. And then for the next 28 years, I worked there and various other places, but doing seniors. In 2019, um, at that point we had been in-house, like I worked directly for the nursing home.
Right.
In that point they decided to farm out the
Oh.
rehab department, and the woman that they brought in to run the department brought me in and said, look, you're the best therapist I have, but I pay you too much money, so you can either take a pay cut or you can go. And I went, unfortunately at the time my mom was sick, and so I said, well, I'm going to go. And I took care of my mother until she passed away in 2019. And then I didn't do anything for about 4 months, and I was bored out of my mind. I have always worked. It just, my kids at that point were pretty grown at that point. And I decided, so I went to work for a friend of mine for about a year who owned a company called Caring Transition. And what we did is we took seniors from their home and we transitioned them into either nursing homes or to assisted livings. We had to figure out what furniture they could take. We could figure out, the amount of clothes and stuff that they could take. And then the rest of the stuff, if the family didn't want it, we would do estate sales or garage sales. We also worked with people who on families of people who had passed away, like seniors who had passed away and who didn't have family nearby. The families would come from wherever, take what they wanted, and the rest of the stuff we would box up, and we would either again do a estate sale or garage sale, and then the money would go to the family and the company took a percentage. So I did that for a little while. That was fun, but it was a lot of heavy lifting.
Mhm.
And then a friend of mine called me who worked for Federation, and she said to me, I need you to come work for me. And I was like, okay. It was right before, just as the pandemic was starting. And she said, we need to do programming for seniors, but it all has to be online. So the first thing that I did is I created these, what we called cozy kits. And they came in different sizes, small, medium, and large. And they were kits that we put together that you could order for your senior parent or family member. And depending on what size and what their interests were, then I would create these kits. And they had puzzles in them, and they had word search things, and they had recipes and all kinds of different things. And people bought these kits for their family members. So I did that, and then they came to me and said, well, now we want to do a lecture series. So then I started this whole lecture series where we did 2 lectures a month, and they were all for the seniors. And that was really interesting. It took a while to find things, but I have a cousin who was a DJ in Philadelphia on the oldie station. His name was Harvey Holiday,
Okay.
but his real name is Harvey Levy. So I asked Harvey to do one, and he talked about all the old radio stations and all the old music from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. That was interesting. We had a gentleman that talked about creating family memories. And what he would do is he would do these videos of people, like his mother was a Holocaust survivor. And so she unfortunately developed Alzheimer's. And so she was starting to forget things. So he decided with his family that they were going to record her telling her whole life story and the family's history and all of that. And that way, when she was gone, they would have all of this. And it was funny because my husband and I had done the same thing on our own. My grandmother lived to be 3 months shy of her 107th birthday.
Wow.
And she had her marbles all the way until the last maybe month.
That's fantastic.
And she had a nephew who lived in California. He was going for his PhD, and he was doing some kind of family tree. And so she gave him all of the information. And she was one of 7. She had 7 older brothers. She was one of 8 children. She had 7 older brothers. And she would tell me the most amazing stories about sitting in Camden. They grew up in Camden. And they watched the Ben Franklin Bridge being built. And then she and her brothers were one of the first people that walked over the footbridge from Camden to Philadelphia.
Very cool.
So she had amazing stories to tell. So that's what he did. He started doing these legacy tapes for people. So that was
Yeah.
really cool. And we came up with a bunch of other people that came and did different interviews for us, and it was wonderful. And then we decided, actually, Federation had started an adult day center for clients with Alzheimer's. It's not a
Mhm.
medical daycare, but it's a daycare.
Sure.
And what happened is they were open from January to March, and then the whole world shut down for COVID, and
Sure.
they were done. So then they came to me and said, I guess about a year into that, they said to me, well, we want to reopen this.
Mm.
And I said, okay. So I reopened it. I was the director of activities, and I ran the entire place for about 2.5 years, 3 years. And then I decided that I was tired of working full time. So I went to them and I said, look, can we hire a director and I'll still do the activities, but I don't want to work full time. And they were like, sure. So that's what I've done for the last 6 months, part time, up until I went out on disability when I had my surgery. And I'm scheduled to go back to work next week. We'll see what happens.
All right. Wow, you have been busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So you are currently living in
Voorhees.
Voorhees. Okay.
I've been here forever.
So when did you,
So
so you were in Philly and you did your you went to Jeff and then worked in McGee and then came back when?
a couple years into that. So probably nine, let's see. So my father died in 85, and then my sister and I had already moved out, but my
Hmm.
sister was living with my mother. My mother had already sold the house, was in the process of selling the house. My parents were going to move. So they moved, my mom moved into the apartment. And then for a while, my sister and I moved in with my mother at Chanticleer, which is right across from Vito's
Oh yeah.
Pizza,
Yeah.
which was really convenient at late nights when I would get hungry. I could just walk across the street. And then after about 6 months, my mother said, either you have to go or your clothes have to go, because three women living in an apartment with lots and lots of shoes and clothes, just there wasn't enough room. So my
Yeah.
sister and I actually moved into Philly. My brother was a builder. So my brother took an old warehouse in Philadelphia and he gutted it. And we built apartments. My sister and I lived together. And then we had another part of the building that were other apartments. So we rented those out.
Nice.
It was great, and it was while I was going to school and working in Philly, so it was wonderful. I lived there for 8 years until my husband and I decided to get married, and then we decided to move back to Jersey because we didn't want to raise our kids in the city.
Okay.
So when my sister and I first moved out of my mom's place, we rented a place in Voorhees, called Rainwood, and they were townhouses. And it
Okay.
turned out to be a gentleman who used to work for my dad. He was a painter, and
Oh
he
wow.
owned this. My dad was a builder, so he worked for my dad. So my sister and I lived there for about 2 years, and then we moved into the city, and we lived there 8 years. And then when Michael and I started looking at places in Jersey, we didn't really find anything that we liked or was in our price range at that point. And it was funny, I jokingly said to Michael one day, I wish I had that old townhouse back. It was great. It was a 2.5, well, 3 bedrooms. I said that would have been perfect. And um, I called the gentleman who owned it and I said, Bob, what's the availability? And he said, I wish you had called me yesterday. And I
Ooh.
said, why? And he said, because I have a guy coming tomorrow to look at it. He and his fiance are going to come look at it. And if they don't take it, I will call you. And I don't know what, something in my head said. I said, the guy's named Michael. And he looked at me, or he said to me, yeah, how did you know? I said, because that's my fiance.
Yeah.
Michael had gone online, seen the ad, and set up this appointment.
Yeah.
So I called Michael and I told him the story. And he said to me, I don't even look at it. Let's just move in. So we did. We moved in. And we lived there for about 3 years, and then we built a house in in Voorhees, and
Oh,
that's
okay.
where we've been for the last 28 years.
All right. So where'd your kids go to school?
They went to Eastern,
Eastern. Okay. Okay. All
all
right.
three of them. So
Yeah.
obviously I have three children.
Yeah. So that's
My
great. So what do you do for fun?
What I do for fun, I do a lot of different things for fun. I exercise a lot, which
Mm.
is part of why I had to have surgery on my arm. Um, I like to read. I read a lot.
Mhm.
According to my Kindle, the other day, I don't know why it popped up that I have read consecutively for 572 weeks.
Oh well,
I'm like,
that's
good.
a lot of weeks.
Yeah. Um,
uh, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
okay. I do a lot of baking and cooking.
Oh
I love to
yeah.
cook. I do a lot of crafts.
Hmm.
I like to paint. And I spend a lot of time with my family. I'm lucky enough that, well, my son is married, lives in Cherry Hill. My daughter lives in Marlton. My little one is in Arizona for the time being going to school. But
Okay.
we have a house in Ventnor. So we spend a lot of time down there. And I just managed to keep myself busy.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So what did you do to, waste time in high school?
In high school, I was part of TEX. And
Okay.
it's so funny when I tell my children that I was in a sorority in high school, they look at me like, what?
Yeah.
What high school? I said, it's the only high school that I know of, certainly around here, that or people I've talked to, had a high school sorority. So I
Yeah.
was involved in TEX all 4 years. I was in IOTA chapter. I was the president. We did a lot of fun stuff. All kinds of activities. There was a formal dance every year, and we did a lot of fundraising. And it was just, I mean, I didn't know any different.
Right.
That's what we did,
Yeah.
and it was fun.
Yeah. Did you belong to any teams or anything? I kind of looked in the book, the
Not
yearbook. I didn't
really.
see.
I was
No.
not really a sports person. I
Okay.
hung out with people that played sports. Later in life, I was a runner. I used
Okay.
to run. I used to run like 40 miles a week.
Oh wow.
So I had a friend who said to me one day, "Let's go running," and she was a runner, and I'm like, I'm not really into this. She goes, "Come on, run with me." I think
Yeah.
I ran around the block. I came home and laid down on the grass and went, "I'm done. Never doing that again." And she's like, "No, you will." And so I did. And then I started running with her. And then I built up to a couple miles. And then it got to the point where I was doing like 5 miles 4 or 5 times a week.
Nice.
And this lovely friend of mine said to me, "I think we should do a half marathon." And I
Oh
went,
wow.
"Are you nuts?" And she's like, "I guess so." But we did it.
Yeah.
And we trained for that. And that was fun. Um, and then I was continued to run. And then after my husband and I got married, I ran. I continued to run. He was not a runner. He was a football player. Like I said, he played
Yeah.
for West. Um, but he would never run with me. He would always wait for me at the end of the race. He
Yeah.
was always the first one there cheering me on, but he was not a runner. Um, then I guess we decided we were going to have children, and I went to the doctor, and she had said to me, "Well, if you're running this many miles, you're probably not going to get pregnant right away, because it's hard to believe in my head right now that I had that little body fat at the time.
Yeah.
I have gained it all back." And so I started running, and then I got pregnant. And she said to me, "Well, you can keep running as long as you feel good." I ran through my 7th month.
Mhm.
I had this belly band that held the band in my belly in place, and I run. And people would be like, look at me like, "You shouldn't be running." I'm like, "Why? I ran before. I'm
Yeah.
healthy. The doctor says it's okay." I
Yeah.
think I ran, like I said, through my 7th month. And then I did step aerobics until the day before my son was born. So
Nice.
my second child, I think I ran through about my 5th or 6th month. By the time I got to the third one, um, I don't think I ran maybe more than 2 or 3 months, because he came way later. I had my
Okay.
first two. So my oldest is 30. Yesterday was his birthday. And then I had my daughter. There's 3 years between those two. We
Okay.
tried for a while, didn't happen. So we kind of went, okay, got two healthy kids. Let's just keep going. And then I turned 40.
Yeah.
And I missed my period, and I said, "Oh, I must be doing the change." And my doctor said, "Just do a test just to be safe." I'm like, "Are you crazy? It's been 5 years
Yeah.
since my daughter was born." He went, "Do the test." And I was pregnant.
Ah.
So there's a big difference. My oldest was 8 and my daughter was 5 when the little one was born.
Yeah.
So, but it's kept me young. It's kept me going. So that was cool. So
Yeah.
he's now at the University of Arizona.
Okay.
This is his third year, and he's going to school for architecture.
Oh wow.
My daughter is 26. She'll be 27 soon. She just finished her master's program. She works with adults with disabilities and children with autism. She's a
Mhm.
BCBA, which is a board certified behavioral analysis, is what she does. And my oldest is an electrical engineer. He works for a company that farms him out to the Navy, and he designs electrical systems for the submarines.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Very
so they're
cool.
all busy and they're all good.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. Um, So, was there a class or a teacher at East that influenced you beyond your high school days?
Um, I don't know about a teacher. I was very good friends with Marcia Kaplan, and her dad, Brad, had a big impact on me. He was the school psychologist,
Oh,
and
okay.
he was also the person I went to when I didn't want to go to class. So I'd go, I have to go visit Mr. Kaplan, and I would hang out in his office. But it kind of got me involved in psychology and thinking about
Mhm,
that. And so when I went off to school, I originally thought I would go pre med, and then I'm like, nah, I don't want to do that. And then I switched to psychology. And like I said, I had always been involved in art and stuff. So that's why I did a minor in art. Originally, I thought I would go for my master's in art therapy, but
mhm.
it didn't work out that way. And it worked out the way it was supposed to. And I loved being an OT. I still technically am an OT.
Yeah.
I still work with seniors and we do a lot of stuff. It's just an amazing feeling. I went to OT school at Jeff with a girl named Debbie Levin who grew up in Woodcrest. She was a couple of years younger than us.
Okay.
And we went to school together and we graduated and she went right into peds. Well, I was not, didn't want to do peds. To
Mhm,
me, that just was, I guess, sad. I felt like I worked with these babies that I knew were never going to have a normal life. And it just
mhm,
was heartbreaking. I wanted to take every one of them home. And
mhm.
she said to me, well, I can't work with seniors because they all die. And I was like, well, we are, here's a news flash. We are all going to die someday.
Yeah,
And I felt that if I could make the end of their life a little bit easier and they could be as independent as they could for as long as possible, that
yeah,
made me feel good.
yeah.
And they had amazing stories to tell.
Yes.
I mean, I
Yes.
always used to say I should have written a book about some of the stories. When I first got out of school, I treated like my friends' grandparents.
Mhm.
And then as I got older, I started to treat my friends' parents.
Yeah.
Then I actually treated someone that I had gone to elementary school with,
Mm.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, and that was like, oh my God, that's when you know you're getting older, when you start treating your contemporaries.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
But I've
Alright.
done it all my life. I can't imagine. I don't know what else I would have done.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, people say, well, if you hadn't been a therapist, what would you have done?
yeah.
Sometimes I think I would have been a party planner.
Oh, yeah. So
That would
kinda
have
like
been fun.
Marsha. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
remember for my kids' bar and bat mitzvahs doing a lot of the work
yeah.
myself. And people would say to me, who's your decorator? I'm like, decorator? I'm the
Yeah.
decorator. I did all this. And I just thought that would be fun, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe my next life.
So did you have a high school sweetheart?
I dated a couple different people in high school.
Yeah.
Let's see. I dated Barry Dudnick.
Okay.
Barry used to play golf. I was very friendly with, and everybody thought I dated Brian Katz, but we were just really good friends. I dated, let's see, Larry Holdson.
Yeah.
And then I actually dated a boy, man, whatever you want to call him, who went to east to west named
Okay,
Steve Stein.
okay,
And I dated him, I guess, my senior year.
okay.
So, but it was all, Tex and sorority always had two big formals a year. One was
Yeah,
the sweetheart ball, and one was the spring frolic. So I
yeah,
went with different people over the years, but
sure.
it's fun. No
How'd you
great love of my life from high school. Although, like
Okay,
I said, my husband did go to West,
yeah. So
but
how'd you
I
meet your
didn't know
husband?
him then. What?
How did
Oh,
you
so
meet
how
your
did I
husband?
meet my husband? So I had dated someone for an extended amount of time, off and on for a while, and it didn't work. And I had met Michael's cousin at the gym, and she kept bugging me. And she said to me, "I want you to meet my cousin. He's a nice guy." And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." And she bugged me for a while, and I finally said to her, "If I go out with him, will you leave me alone?" She said yes. So it wound up that my boss roommate was moving out. So I introduced Elise, which is Michael's cousin, to my boss, and they moved in together because her roommate was getting married. And they decided, or we decided, that we would just do a barbecue. And that way he would be there. We would have other people. If we hit it off, we hit it off. If we didn't, so be it. So the day before the thing, she calls me and she said, well, Michael's coming and he's coming with his best friend, Fred. Fred's a nice Jewish guy. He's going to medical school. If you don't like Michael, maybe you'll like Fred. I said, okay. So I go to the barbecue. Michael comes in, walks in with Fred, and I look at Fred and I'm like, what are you doing here? Fred was my cousin.
Oh, wow.
I didn't realize that Michael and Fred had been high friends all through high school,
Oh,
actually
wow.
elementary school and high school. And I thought Michael was nice that night. We chatted, it was a group of people. He didn't ask me for my phone number. I went, okay.
Huh.
So the next day, my girlfriend was like, well, I'm like, well, he didn't ask me for my phone number. I said he was nice, but, on to the next. And then I ran into him like a week later at a party, and he said to me, I've been trying to get your phone number. And I said, well, you're best friends with my cousin. Why didn't you just ask Fred? He said, I did. He wouldn't give it to me. And I'm like, why wouldn't he give it to you? And he said, he told me you weren't Michael's type. I'm like,
Oh, gosh.
okay. So then we dated, and
There
then
you are.
we dated for about 3 years, and then we got engaged. And now we've been married for 31 years. We have 3 children.
Yeah.
We're still married. We haven't killed each other. Um,
All right. That's
and
great.
it's been great. We've been through a lot of ups and downs together over the years.
Mhm.
Michael was on a TV show many years ago, and he made me a reluctant TV star.
Oh, wow.
Michael was on a TV show called Extreme Weight Loss with Chris Powell.
Okay.
And the premise behind the show is they would follow someone who was very heavy. Michael was very, very heavy at the time,
Mhm.
over 400 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And they would follow them for a year. And then they would do an entire episode on this person and how they lost the weight.
Okay.
So it's originally he had tried to get onto The Biggest Loser and a bunch of other TV shows, and it never worked. And I actually made him sign a contract that said he would stop trying to get on TV shows. And then he came to me and he said, well, they called me. And I went, really? And he said, I swear, this is the last time. I said, okay, but this has to be the last time. And he would lose 100 pounds, and then he would gain it back, and then he would lose it. And so anyway, he said he would do it. They said to him, well, can you come to the Four Seasons Hotel in Philadelphia for the interview? Michael said yes. So he walks into the interview and he says to them, the last time I was in this hotel was 19 years ago on my wedding day, and I weighed 250 pounds less than I do now. How cool would it be if I came back here next year for my 20th anniversary and renewed my wedding vows 250 pounds lighter? So
Wow.
that was the story behind his episode. There were a bunch of other stuff that went into it, because at one point they discovered they put you through a battery of tests. Like they take people out to California and they were there for a week. They did a battery of tests. You're supposed to stay for the week. During that point, you meet with the ABC executives to see if they like your personality. Michael went through it and he was doing really well. And then they came to him and said, on one of the tests, we found some plaque on your arteries. It's not life-threatening, but we're just a little concerned that if you're stressing where you have to lose 250 pounds, that may be too much on your heart. So we're going to not pick you. Michael was like, okay. And they said to him, well, this is Thursday. You're supposed to go home on Sunday. You can stay, you can go. And Michael called and said, well, what do you think I should do? And I said, well, during the day, they're giving you nutrition classes and they're teaching you exercise and doing all this. You were supposed to be there, stay till Sunday. Yeah. And then you'll come home. He said, okay. And then during the time that they were having the meetings with the executives, the other people that they were looking at, he would go to the gym. And one day the executive director of the show came in and he was in the gym. And he then went back to the director and said, this guy, you kicked him out. He's not going home. He's staying. He's doing everything that he can do. And out of all of the people, I think there were 35 people at that time, they said he's lost the most amount of weight in the week. So they came back and they said, if you go to your cardiologist and you are approved and he clears you, we'll consider putting you back in. But you need to have an EKG and a stress test and all of these tests. And Michael said, oh, that's not a problem. I just had all of these a month ago or 2 months ago, because he had some minor surgery and they did all of that. And they said, well, get the records from the doctor and we'll talk. So the doctor sent all the records, and then they decided that they were going to use him and that he was going to be Rocky because he was from Philly. And that was the comeback story as well as the wedding story.
Oh, wow.
So it was really cool. And like he had 3 months to lose 118 pounds. And then
is that practical? I mean, again, that's a lot of weight.
It's not really practical. It's for the
okay.
show, and they monitored. He had doctors and he had therapists and he had all kinds of counseling, and it was, a lot. They put a lot into it just to make sure. And so his first, if you reach your first goal, they make you do an activity or something, and then you get a prize.
Mm.
So the first one that he had to do was he had to lose the 118 pounds, which he did. And then his activity was that he had to run, since he was Rocky, from the bottom of the Ben Franklin Bridge all the way up Vine Street to the top of the Art Museum steps like Rocky. And then that's where they did the weigh-in.
Wow.
Which was really cool. And he
Cool,
did
but
it.
really difficult.
It wasn't difficult for me because I'd been running all those
Oh
years. He
yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
see, I should have ran with you.
Yeah, yeah.
But he did it, and he lost the weight. And so the prize that they gave us was a cruise
Oh.
in the Caribbean. And so he then had his next 3 months, he had to lose, I think it was like 88 pounds.
Mm.
And then his next activity was we went to Florida where the cruise was, and they did a boxing match with what happened is he had to with a Golden Gloves boxer, and his trainer worked with him and taught him how to train. And the guy knew that this was all for TV, so he wasn't supposed to beat the hell out of him. He was supposed to pull the punches, but it was a real fight.
Yeah.
So the day before the fight, the Chris Powell, who's the guy who is the host for the show, came to us and said, Michael, we're not really sure you're ready for this. This guy's a Golden Gloves boxer. We don't want you to get beat up. So we're going to bring someone in and work with you for a day or so, and hopefully that'll help. So now we're all panicking. He's starting to freak out. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's going to beat the hell out of my husband. Yeah. And in walks Evander Holyfield. So Evander Holyfield was Michael's trainer.
How cool is that?
For the day. It was so cool. He was really cool. Of course, the first thing I did was kind of look at his ear.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was actually very cool, and he was very nice.
Yeah.
Then we spent 2 days with him in training, and then Michael did. And originally they were only going to do 4 rounds, but Michael did so well they went the full 12 rounds.
Whoa!
So yeah. So then after that we got to go on this cruise, and then they videotaped us on the cruise doing all kinds of activities, and it was fun. And then they did the scene where Michael reproposes to me, or asked me to renew our wedding vows.
Yeah. And
I said yes after 14 takes. So we did. That was the end of it. Then he lost all of the weight, and then they do a reveal at the very end where you come through and everybody gets to see all your weight loss, and they tape all of this. It's the final part of the episode. So we did it at the Four Seasons Hotel in Philadelphia. Our rabbi came and married us again. We renewed our wedding vows, and Michael had lost 240 some pounds. Wow. So it was great, but it was a long year.
Wow, I imagine. And his health is good?
Yeah, his health is good. He's gained some of it back, but don't we all?
Yeah. Wow, that's an amazing story.
Yeah, it was cool.
And what was the name of the show again?
It's called Extreme Weight Loss. You can Google it, or you can do it on demand. I have to preface it by saying, even though it's reality TV, they do stretch the truth a little bit. They kind of made me out to be a bitch. They do this thing where I would have all my kids at the table, and they would put down a box of Dunkin' Donuts. Well, I don't normally feed my children Dunkin' Donuts for breakfast, but for the show, it made a story, and because they didn't want my kids to be heavy. Meanwhile, none of my kids have ever been heavy. But anyway, they do little things to make it look, but it was interesting.
That is, wow. So are you still in touch with folks from school, friends that you're still, you still hang out with? Who might that be?
So my closest friend graduated the year before us, and her name was Jody Pollock. She's now Jody Wall. Okay. We've been friends since second grade. There was a group of us, and it was Jody, Mimi. Well, she was Mimi Spellman, who lived next door to us. Mimi also graduated in 79. And then her sister, Marcia Spellman, who was now Marcia Goldie, and then Gail Celine, she was Goldie Goldblatt then. So we're all still friends. I talked to a lot of people. It's weird. For a long time, I didn't talk to anybody. And then my children discovered this thing called Facebook. And I went on Facebook to be one of those mothers who knew what their kids were doing. And then we chased our children off of Facebook. What?
Then we chased our children off of Facebook
Absolutely.
accordingly.
Absolutely. But I found a whole new world of people that
Yeah.
I hadn't talked to in 20 years. And it's funny because there's people that I'm now Facebook friends with that I wasn't friends with in high school, but I've become friends with
Yeah.
over the years because of Facebook. I think it's a really cool thing. And yes, none of my kids are on Facebook. Now it's either Instagram or I don't even know.
Yes. Yeah. That's funny. How about anybody that you were tight with you lost track of? Or, I mean, a lot of
Um,
people you have been able to reconnect with Facebook, but I'm just kind of curious.
well, I still am in touch occasionally with Cindy Carr.
Yeah.
I don't know, has Cindy done one yet? I didn't think so.
No, she hasn't. I'm hoping she will.
I'll call her and tell her. But
Okay.
we had actually been friends for a long time, then lost touch for a while, and then she recently remarried
Oh,
um,
okay.
a gentleman that went to West and who was friends with my husband.
Oh, okay.
So we're friends on Facebook. We've actually gotten together once or twice in the last couple of years. Um, Eileen Cohen Racher,
Yeah.
I see
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
on Facebook because her sister became very friendly. We became very friendly here in Cherry Hill because our sister used to run the camp that my kids went to, the overnight camp.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
Jody, so we remained friendly, and
Where's
um,
Eileen living? Is she a Florida
she
person?
lives in Florida. Jody actually just moved to Florida in the last couple of
Oh, okay.
years.
Yeah.
Trying to think who else. It's pretty much it.
Okay. Do you have a standout memory from high school? Something that sticks with you?
Um, I would have to say, and I know we've talked about this, just text, all of my
Hmm.
activities with text, because that's
Yeah.
really where my life revolved in text. I was not really a sports oriented person at that point. Um, my friends all played, a lot of my friends played sports, but I was not really sports oriented. So most of my memories revolve around that and just the different events that we would do.
Yeah.
So,
So we're back in 1980 and we've graduated and you're looking out. Is this where you
yep.
saw yourself?
Um, Actually, probably not, because originally I thought I was going to go to medical school.
Ah, okay.
I'd always liked working with people, taking care of people. Um, and I kind of thought that would be my route. Went to college and didn't really like all of the sciences. I give you all the praise in the world. I don't know. I know I couldn't have done it. So then I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and
I
then
don't
that's
know.
when I
You
switched.
went back afterwards and took those classes
I
anyway.
did. I
Yeah.
did. Who knew?
Who knew?
But I knew that I wanted to work with people. I knew I wanted to take care of people. I had always worked with seniors, even in high school. I had volunteered at the Jewish Geriatric Home, and they had a program where you would feed the residents that
Hmm.
couldn't feed themselves. So I knew it's something that I wanted to do that kind of stuff. So I deviated a lot actually from medical school, but I still am in the medical profession. My family all still thinks I know more than I do and asks me all kinds of medical questions. I'm like, I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV.
Yeah.
But was in the medical field for
Yes,
many, many years.
of
So,
course. So best piece of advice you'd go back and give your 18-year-old self, or maybe you gave your 18-year-old kids.
um, enjoy it. We spend, and I know our kids do the same thing, maybe even worse than us, spend so much time geared towards the future. What do you want to do with your life? Where do you want to go? Where do you see yourself? Just enjoy it. I mean, I obviously there's people that I've lost touch with over the years that I wish I had stayed in touch with. Um, but just enjoy. I tell my kids that all the time. You have your entire life. You don't have to know what you want to do at 18 years old, because let me tell you, I didn't.
Yeah.
My kids were lucky enough. Actually, my oldest was lucky enough. From the time he was little, he knew he wanted to be an engineer. He was one of those kids that you would give him a radio as a present and he would take the whole thing apart and then put it back together. My daughter always babysat, loved kids, and she gravitated towards the kids with special needs. So that
Hmm.
was kind of like, we knew that's where she was headed. I tried to convince her to go to OT school. She didn't want to, but she found her way and she's done amazing, and she has an amazing career. And my
Great.
little one, like I said, well, when you asked him when he was little, and you would say, Aiden, what do you want to be when you grow up? Originally, he said a fireman, standard answered. And then at one point, he decided he wanted to be an underwater welder. And we
Ooh.
all looked at him and said, where did you find that? And he said, "Oh, I saw a video on TV and that looks really cool." Well, it took us a while, but we convinced him that probably wasn't the best job for him. But he always liked to draw, and my father was a builder, so it kind of was in his blood. And
Yeah.
so, like I said, he's now going to school for architecture. He wants to do sustainable and green housing.
Oh,
He's
cool.
like, I don't want to just build old buildings. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay. So that's what he
Very
wants to do.
cool. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, good advice. Good advice. Live in the
Yeah.
moment sometimes.
Yep.
Yep.
Sometimes we spend so much time worrying about the future that
Yep.
we don't enjoy what we're doing right now.
Absolutely.
It's
All right.
important.
So we've reached our fast and furious finish.
Okay.
And all right. So, did you have a favorite TV show, movie, or book from back during high school?
Favorite TV show would probably have been one of the medical, like Marcus Welby, or
Oh, wow.
I love those. Joe
Yeah.
Gannon, those kind of TV shows. And I do have to admit that to this day, I still watch General Hospital.
Oh,
When I was
really?
little and I would come home from school, my mother always had it on and I would watch. My husband makes fun of me because I tape it and then at night I'll like zoom through the parts that I don't like. A couple of years ago for my 60th, it was the pandemic and we could not do a big party.
Sure.
So we did one of those drive-by parties. So
Yeah.
my husband is very creative and very computer oriented. And he found this website where you can go and you can have famous people send you messages
Oh,
called
yeah, yeah.
Cameo. And there's another
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah.
So he had all of these stars like Laura and Jason and all these famous General Hospital stars send me happy birthday messages.
That's
So
so
that was
cool.
really cool. My favorite book, and it's funny because I just reread it and
Uh,
I reread it like every 5 or 6 years, was a book called Flowers for Algernon.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
There was
remember
also a
that.
movie.
Yeah.
Um, and it was just one of my favorite books. And like I said, I reread it every couple of years just
Yeah.
because it's a cool book. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So did you have a favorite musical group, genre, or artist? And here we go. Shout out to Heaven's Edge.
Oh, yes. Heaven's Edge. Absolutely. Funny story. You want to talk about Heaven's Edge? Um, Ethan, my oldest, decided he wanted to take guitar lessons. He was about, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10 years old. And I said to him, well, talk to your friends, find out who, around gives guitar lessons. So he comes home one day and he says to me, Mom, I found a guitar instructor. I said, oh, cool. What's his name? He hands me a piece of paper, says Reggie Wu on it. And he says to me, Mom, not only does he teach guitar, but he lives in our neighborhood. And I went, okay. So, sidebar, my husband was always into Halloween, and we do Halloween big. I
Yeah.
guess it comes from being Jewish, and he couldn't do the lights and things. So he goes crazy for Halloween. So they used to come from miles around to see our house
Oh,
for
cool.
years. So I call Reggie up and I'm like, hi, Reggie. And he's like, oh my God, Nance. We start chatting. And I said, I live in your neighborhood. He said, what street do you live on? I said, I live on Maison Place, which is the street right behind.
Yeah.
And he said to me, oh my God, how close do you live to the Halloween house? I said, Reggie, I live in the Halloween
Well,
house.
that's
So
great.
Ethan took lessons from him. Gab, my daughter, took piano lessons at one time. And 2 weeks ago, right before my little one went back to school, my oldest Ethan was taking Aiden for a ride, and they ran into Reggie out front of his house, and they stopped and they were chatting. And then Reggie texted me and said, "Oh, I just saw the boys."
Yeah.
So it was cool.
Yes.
But back to your original question, my favorite music in high school had to have been Springsteen and Billy Joel,
Yeah.
nonstop. That was probably pretty much what I listened to.
Yeah. Yeah. So, did you have a favorite place to hang out with friends or to eat? Were you a diner gal?
I was sometimes. We would go to Ponzio's
Yeah.
after any Tex event. When it was over at night, we would go to Ponzio's. I remember going one night, and there must have been like 20 of us. And we
Yeah.
were all sitting at this long table, and we all ordered. And then the woman brought the check, and we sat there for like 20 minutes deciding, who paid this bought this. And then we hand her the money, and she says to me, "Their gentleman in the table behind you paid for your bill for everybody." And I turn
Wow.
around and it was my dad and Bert Kerr, Cindy Kerr's dad. The two of them had picked up the tab. So then we had to sit for another 20 minutes trying to figure out who
Yeah.
gave what. But Ponzio's was probably one of my favorites. And I guess Vito's. I mean, who
Yeah.
didn't love Vito's pizza?
Yeah. Oh, goodness. All right. So here we go. Remember her?
Oh, yeah, I remember her.
You
That was a
look
long time
older
ago.
than ever. And I mean, not, and I mean that with admiration.
That's okay.
Everybody
It's
else,
okay.
um, I look at everybody else and you just look so much more mature than the rest of us.
Maybe it was it was an act. It really was an act. Maybe
Oh
it
no,
was the hair.
it
I
could have
don't
been
know.
the hair. Yeah, it could have been the hair. Or the cowl neck. Yeah, no.
That could be, which I do not wear. It's funny. I do not like anything tight anymore.
Yeah,
Like I will
yeah,
never wear a turtleneck. It could be
yeah,
5 degrees out and I am not wearing a turtleneck.
yeah. All right, so I play around with this next to last question. So I'm going to go. What
Okay.
was your first concert? Do you remember your first concert? Who'd you see?
My first concert was probably Springsteen.
Yeah, yeah. Do you
The
remember what year?
Fendrick boys. Remember Mark Fendrick?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so Mark used to put concerts together, and they were
Yeah,
all part of
Marsha
the group.
was. I did not know that. Yeah.
Yes, and so I think he probably did. Springsteen was my first concert,
Okay.
and it was funny because
Do you
my
remember what year that
oldest,
was?
I'm gonna
Probably, roughly.
say, we graduated in '80,
Yeah.
probably '78, maybe
Okay. Okay.
somewhere around there. And it's funny because the first concert I ever took my oldest to was a Springsteen concert.
Oh, that's
And for
great.
years, Ethan played the trumpet. And when he
Mm.
originally started, I said, you should play the saxophone. And he's like,
Mhm.
why? And I'm like, oh,
E Street
Clarence
Band.
Clement is this
Yeah.
amazing man. He was like, yeah, whatever. He wanted no part of it. He played the trumpet. I took him to his first Springsteen concert, and about 20 minutes into the concert, Clarence Clemens did this amazing solo, and he turned around to me and goes, Mom, you were right. You should have taken the saxophone. And I said to him, listen, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is always listen to your mother. She knows.
There you
So
go.
we joke about it now.
So lastly, anything you want to tell anybody from school or everybody who might be listening, your parting shot, as it were?
My parting shout is just continue to live your life, continue to enjoy. Anybody who wants to meet me and reconnect, there's always Facebook. But just enjoy. I mean, life, I've learned over the years from a lot of the different things that I've been through that life is just too short. And, we always say we're going to do something later where we'll get to it, and we don't always.
Yeah.
And so we try and my husband and I do what we want to do. We just started to travel. We're going to Rome in the spring with some
Oh,
friends,
nice.
and just enjoy life because before you know it, we're
Yeah.
old. I used to think my mother was so old when she was in her 60s, and now I'm like, nothing. 60s is
Yeah,
nothing.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, perspective changes.
Absolutely. My kids probably think I'm old now, but
Yeah. Well, Nanci, thank you so much for doing this. This was great. It was great to catch up and
my
hear all your
pleasure.
stories. It was fun. All right. We'll see you soon.
Yes, hopefully I will try and get there on Friday.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Yep. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for joining me on It's Been How Long? The podcast about Cherry Hill High School East students from the late 1970s and the early 80s. A shout out to my cousin Brad Corbett, whose podcast We Weren't Friends in High School inspired me to do this podcast and whose advice and encouragement have been so helpful. Thanks also to my husband, Randy Coughdale, who read all the fine print on the podcast hosting website so I wouldn't have to. And thanks to Jeff Lyons, content consultant and guinea pig, and to Deborah Smead, also content consultant. And thank you to all our classmates who are listening in. See you next week.